Hello, and welcome to Let My People Eat, a podcast that provides satisfying talk about kosher nutrition. Here we clear through the clutter of nutrition speak, arm you with the clarity and confidence to eat, feel, and be your healthiest every day. I am Jill Sharkman, a board-certified holistic nutritionist living in Los Angeles.
And I'm Dr. Andrea Moskowitz, a neuroscientist and psychiatrist in Los Angeles. I use my training and experience to integrate positive lifestyle changes into my patients' lives.
Hey, Andrea.
Hey, Jill. How are you doing?
I am doing well, thank you. So I have a question for you. This podcast is all about healthy eating and how to live a healthier lifestyle.
Right.
Do you think, though, by changing our diets, we can have a dramatic effect on things like fertility?
I think probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much studies there are on that, but I mean, in general, and you know, problems with fertility are complicated. So there's many different reasons why people have fertility problems.
Right.
On the male side and on the female side.
Right. It can be structural.
It can be structural.
Hormonal.
Yeah, a lot of different reasons. Structural, hormonal, genetic issues that can interfere with fertility. Mm-hmm. Just a lot of different things. So It's very hard sometimes to just say, oh yeah, just do diet and that'll fix it. I think it can in cases.
Right.
You know, and it just depends where the fertility reasons.
Okay. So the issue that we're going to focus on today is PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome, which is the most common endocrine condition among U.S. women of reproductive age. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about, maybe changing diet to help increase, because PCOS is not something that somebody has to live with forever. It can be a syndrome. It can be.
It is a syndrome.
It is a syndrome. Right. That's what it's called.
Because nobody really knows exactly why it happens. Mm-hmm. There's conjecture. There's things that seem to be correlated with it, but they don't really know if it causes it.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
So, and you're right. It's present in 5 to 10% of women of childbearing age. Mm-hmm. So that's quite a large number. And in women who are having problems becoming pregnant, I'm sure it's probably a higher percentage of those women.
Right. Got it. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our guest today, who is well-versed because she herself has been diagnosed with PCOS in the past. Lauren Allen is a recovering sugar addict turned holistic nutrition coach who helps people eat their way to health while enjoying each bite along the way. After being diagnosed with PCOS, Lauren turned to diet and lifestyle interventions to address the root cause of her syndrome. When she discovered the power of food as medicine in treating chronic illness, she started sharing her story in order to help others going through the same thing. Lauren lives in Israel with her husband. And how old's your daughter now, Lauren?
4 months.
4-month-old daughter. Hey, Lauren, welcome to Let My People Eat.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So talk to us a little bit about, you're a self-proclaimed sugar addict. Like, how, take us back a few years. What was your lifestyle like? And then what precipitated the change and adopting a healthier lifestyle?
Okay, so growing up, I would say I had a pretty normal relationship with food for anyone, in America who's on that standard American diet. We had sugary cereals for breakfast, and I would eat real foods throughout the day. But, those real foods were mostly things like chicken nuggets and pasta, sometimes vegetables. But for the most part, I really, I loved sweets, cookies, ice cream, all that good stuff. So when I say I was a sugar addict, I really mean it. And I was also really passionate about baking, both because I like to eat the things I would make, but also just from an artistic perspective, I really liked making cupcakes and decorating them with the frosting and all that kind of stuff. So, I grew up and really always loved sweets, and that continued on until basically after I was married and my husband and I were trying to get pregnant. We were struggling to get pregnant, and after many, many months, even though I had, gone to doctors earlier on, I kind of suspected something was off, and they kept saying, well, just wait a little bit. It could take time. It could take time. I was diagnosed with PCOS.
Okay, so let's stop for a minute. So, Andrea, PCOS, we talked about, it's very common. What are some of the symptoms that somebody has with PCOS?
Yeah, actually, there's criteria right now. Okay. So, which one of them? So, you're supposed to have 2 out of 3 of the following. Although I will say, to mention, I was diagnosed with it years and years ago. You had to have 3 out of 3 at that point.
Right. And Andrea, as everybody who listens knows, Andrea has 2 children. Thank God. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
Right. So it's irregular periods, often from the get-go. Sometimes it can develop during teenagers, but often from the get-go. And by that, there means they're infrequent, they're irregular, or they're prolonged. I used to joke around that I had irregular periods. Excessive androgen,
which means
that's the male, quote unquote, the male hormone. Although all women produce androgen,
right? Let's
just put it out there, okay? So 0 androgen is not normal for a woman either. So it's excessive, or potentially it could be an excessive response to androgen. Mm-hmm. If you'd had hyper sensitive receptors or things like that. So, and that's often seen with increased body hair.
Or thinning hair,
or male, especially in a certain pattern. Mm-hmm. So especially, it's easier to tell when you're younger because you should really usually have
hair loss. Yeah.
Right. But it's also a male pattern baldness, mm-hmm. which is sort of losing hair at the temples, mm-hmm. and sort of toward the top of the head.
Right.
Rather than women can lose hair from other reasons, but it will be kind of more all over the place. And then, or severe acne. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the other thing is polycystic ovaries, which is the name of the disorder, right? Polycystic ovary disease. And that's when they would do an ultrasound, and they'd see that, usually somebody's, even without polycystic ovary disease, if you do mm-hmm. an ultrasound, you may see a little cyst or a bubble there from an egg that's just been released, mm-hmm. but it'll be like a clump of them. Okay. And that actually will prevent eggs from being released mm-hmm. because they develop.
Right. What about weight gain? Isn't weight gain known to be?
That's not in one of those. It's not in the criteria right now. Mm-hmm. I think because it can happen. Yes. Right. And definitely also, it's hard to tell. This is like a chicken and egg thing. Mm-hmm. So one thing.
It's literally an egg thing because
the
hormones interfere with the production of the release of the eggs.
Right. Because some women, because then look at causes, right? So some women have excessive insulin release.
Right. So I want to talk about all that. So Lauren, did you experience these symptoms when you started figuring this out?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that the only thing I grew up having was somewhat irregular periods, and they weren't irregular enough to be worried. And honestly, I was kind of happy about it because who wants to have their period all the time? Mine were pretty far apart. And I was like, oh, that's not a bad thing. And then as I got older and was, trying to get pregnant, it became very frustrating because mm-hmm. having less periods means you're ovulating less frequently or not ovulating at all. And most of the other symptoms that are associated, I didn't have. There were other things going on that also changed as I, as I addressed my diet, but not necessarily related to PCOS.
So can you give me an example of something that may have changed?
Yeah, I had really bad eczema. And that wasn't something I ever connected to PCOS, but as soon as I reduced my sugar intake, not as soon, but a few weeks after, it went away really dramatically. Right. And that was amazing.
Right. So you brought up the insulin resistance.
Right. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of that, also associated with it is kind of like having low grade inflammation. Mm-hmm. So that could be tied with the eczema a little bit.
Right.
Because that is like an inflammatory process.
Right.
And then it's interesting because low grade inflammation, I just looked it up, can stimulate your ovaries to produce increased androgens, which can then interfere with ovulation.
Right. It's this whole
cycle. It all intertwines.
Yeah. And there's also studies showing that women with PCOS have higher rates of gut dysbiosis. So then there's a bunch of things that can be stemming from that. So I think there was like a whole bunch of issues that, you know, as I addressed the root causes, it spilled over into a lot of other areas.
Right. So one of the types of PCOS, which is the most common and probably what you experienced, was the insulin resistant PCOS, which is caused by sugar, trans fats. It could also be smoking, things like that. So were you told that you were pre-diabetic? Did you have elevated insulin?
So I wasn't told, and it's funny because I have a lot of family members who have diabetes, but I talk about this a lot. I think, you know, in our world, a lot of times health is judged based on the way a person looks, and I'm very thin. And so I don't think it was ever on my doctor's mind. I don't think it was ever on my own mind that I would be a candidate for diabetes or that I would have any issues with insulin. I wasn't even tested until all of this started happening, even though I had, you know, multiple people in my family who had diabetes, but no one ever really thought to look at that.
Right. So the first thing I'm guessing that you did was start to cut back on your sugar.
Yeah. So, and also just because you asked about the insulin and the doctors, when I went to see this doctor and I got diagnosed with PCOS, their first response was actually, you know, okay, like let's start fertility treatments. And they were not at all talking about, you know, all of the things that are related to diet and lifestyle. And I'm sure most of your listeners are already familiar with the amazing effects that, you know, cleaning up your diet can have on the body, but I really didn't know anything about that. So, it was funny. I was, you know, totally ready to start doing these fertility treatments. And then once they showed me that there would have to be a lot of injections, I was like, whoa, I got really freaked out. I'm very scared of needles. And then I started looking into, okay, well, what else can I do? There must be something. There must be some other sort of medication or something I can do. And that's when I learned all about these dietary interventions. And one of the biggest ones is exactly what you said, starting to combat that insulin resistance by reducing sugar.
Right. So you were at this point self-taught.
So I actually found, I was doing a course. I found online a course that was taught by this woman who basically uses diet and lifestyle interventions to help women with PCOS. So I was learning through that course.
Okay. Got it. So I want to talk more about what you did, but there are a couple of other types of PCOS. There's one called post-pill PCOS, which is when people get off hormonal birth control, which suppresses ovulation. So that one, obviously, if somebody, you know, stops the pill, that can on its own start to regulate. So it's important to know, you know, that that's an factor. We talked about inflammatory PCOS, which is inflammation. There's symptoms like headaches, joint pain, or skin conditions, like you said, eczema. So that one also has to be treated and looked at properly. I mean, you were lucky because when you changed your diet, your inflammation went down. So that's really good. And then the fourth one is adrenal PCOS. Which is the elevated adrenal androgens like DHEA. But that's also something that would have to be identified. So even if somebody's told they have PCOS, the question is, what kind of PCOS do you have? Because the treatment could differ.
But I think also because there is so much interplay between these different hormone systems, I don't know I think for a lot of women, it's probable that they don't have clearly one type or the other. So, because like one thing can cause another.
Right. Yes.
You know, so,
yeah. Okay. So, Lauren, so continue to take us along on your journey and what you discovered. So you took this course.
Right.
And so I took this course, and it's also funny because, again, I really was like, I was such a dessert person. And so, you know, I was known as a baker. It was really a part of my identity. And so I very much thought, okay, I'm just going to do this until I get pregnant. And then, you know, this will be like a very short-lived phase. And then as I, you know, cut out some of the sugar and refined carbohydrates and started replacing it with more vegetables and whole foods and healthy proteins, I just started feeling so good. So I had these really dramatic changes, not just related to the PCOS, but a few weeks after, I had started sleeping so well. And before that, I was taking melatonin every night just to fall asleep. And then all of a sudden I was able to fall asleep without the use of sleep medication. I had really had for a long time low-grade anxiety that was just constant, and I had kind of accepted that would be part of my life forever. And also when I really think it was just from cutting out the sugar, that went down tremendously. And so there were all these different pieces. The eczema went away. My mood was much better. I had so much more energy. So I wasn't just falling asleep better, but I was also waking up with more, just feeling more well rested. And then my periods began to be regular. So that was, obviously so exciting. And then I ended up getting pregnant naturally, which was also just a huge blessing. And it was so exciting, but I felt like it was so much more than just getting pregnant. I was like, oh my gosh, does everyone know that if you eat healthy, you'll actually feel good in your body? Why are we not all talking about this? And that's then when I decided I wanted to take it a step further and become a certified health coach and just talk about this and talk about, how food can really be medicine for us.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. So how long did it take from like when you changed your diet to when you got pregnant? How long was that?
It was like 2.5 months.
Wow, that's
quick.
Really quick.
Which is really quick. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other question I have is, did your husband change his eating patterns along with you?
So definitely not at first, but he was very, very supportive. I remember I came home once and he was like, oh my gosh, I'm making grilled cheese and I wanted to finish it before you came. And I was like, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's funny because now he's just seen how much it's impacted me. And he said also just by virtue of the fact that I love to do a lot of the cooking and the shopping, he eats so much healthier just because that's what we have around. So It used to be you'd walk into our kitchen and there was always freshly baked chocolate chip cookies or muffins. And now there's just cut up vegetables. So he said he's passively changed his diet a lot just because of convenience.
Yeah.
Right. The other point you could bring up with him, which you probably have already, is, it's going to be good for our kids that we're both eating healthfully and we have that in our lifestyle and everything, and we model that for them.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's something I think about a lot also. Originally, I really intended for this to be like a short phase of healthful eating. And then I also learned about, I had a baby girl. And so she's, of course, at risk then for all of these things too, for PCOS, for diabetes.
Right.
So, it's really important to me that this is not just a little phase, but really a lifestyle to treat our body as well.
Yeah. So research has shown that the Mediterranean diet is a good option for helping people reducing exposure to their hormones, getting their reproductive system back on track. So Andrew and I have obviously talked about this, but things like olive oil, leafy greens, fatty fish, tree nuts are all very good for fighting inflammation. Lauren, did you eliminate dairy when you went down this road?
Yeah, I did. I had known previously that I was probably lactose intolerant. Without getting into too much detail, I saw a correlation between how I felt after eating dairy. So it wasn't surprising to me that when I cut it out, that also was helpful.
Right. Yeah. Also because the dairy, most of the dairy, at least in this country, has a lot of hormones.
Right.
And if part of the goal to remedy PCOS is to cut back on the number of hormones we're exposed to, probably cutting back on dairy that has hormones is probably a good idea.
Right.
Yeah. What about eating organically? Is that something you can do in Israel? Is that like an option?
Yeah, so it's an option. It's definitely a more expensive option, and we do the best we can. I definitely don't only eat organic. It's just like I wish I did, but it's just not always the most convenient thing to do. Right. So I try here and there, but I didn't completely cut out, conventional fruits and vegetables. And from everything that I've researched, it's still much better to be eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, right, even if they're not organic, as opposed to not eating them and, replacing them with something else.
Correct. 100%. I mean, Andrew and I always say that, if the option to eat organic is there, great. But if not, that doesn't mean you shouldn't eat your fruits and vegetables.
Right. Exactly.
So when you made the changes, it sounds like you did it pretty quickly.
Yeah. I'm kind of an all or nothing person.
Right.
So I knew that for me personally, it was the kind of thing I had to jump in 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this a lot also because I think now in the health and wellness space, there's a lot of emphasis on moderation and how, moderation is a key element in, having a healthy lifestyle. And I think just with some personalities, it actually can work better to be a little bit more all or nothing.
Right.
Yeah. Gretchen Rubin, who I quote all the time, she's the author of The Happiness Project. She says it's very important to know, are you the all or nothing person so that, you can't have any of the food in the house because if you do, you're going to eat all of it? Or are you somebody I'm more somebody who can have something have one cookie and put it away. So it's important to know, yourself when you start to do this type of thing. It's also
I think I heard Gretchen Rubin talking about this, the abstainers versus moderators.
That's
I realized because I had certain, either sugar-free treats or certain things that I had around. And I realized that I wasn't enjoying them because I was so tense about if I'm going to have one of them, when should I eat it? And I have to make sure that I savor each and every bite. And I realized when I just wasn't having them, there was no stress. I felt much better and it just wasn't worth the trouble for me.
Yeah.
And it's totally a personality thing.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for remembering abstainers versus moderators. Yeah. It's great. Supporting your liver is also very important because the liver detoxifies all the hormones. So we want to create less stress for the liver. So any over-the-counter drugs, you want to drink lots of water, you want to eat your cruciferous vegetables and bitter foods, because the liver, and we forget this, but the liver is critical in helping us process hormones in our body. So we have to support our liver. Okay, what about soy, Lauren? There's debate about soy. We've talked about it on our breast cancer issues.
Right. So again, just like you said, the research on soy is really mixed. Right. So I know people who claim that it's really helpful. I've read all these different, doctors talking about in their clinic, soy is helpful, in their clinic, soy is, forbidden. For me, I decided just not to have it because, if there's a doubt, I wanted to err on the side of caution. But I know that the research is really mixed out there.
Right.
So
the only thing I would say about soy, because I do eat soy, I don't eat it all the time. I don't eat highly processed soy, but over 90% of soy is genetically modified. So that it could have an impact. So yeah, Andrea's shaking her head, but yeah. I mean, so the key is not to eat highly processed soy. I think that's the side that we came down on when we spoke with Tamar Rothenberg on those episodes, that soy is fine,
right,
but just not highly processed soy products.
And I think the key is also that in general to try to eat as few highly processed products as possible, and to try to eat, if you're going to get something that's pre-prepared, as few ingredients as possible in the ingredient list.
So we talked about food. What about other things like BPA or parabens in your skincare products, anything that they're called xenoestrogens, which are chemicals that mimic estrogen in the body. They're found in canned foods, plastics, cosmetics, personal cares, household cleaners. Is that a part of your life that you address too?
Yeah, so that's something that's been a much slower journey for me. I'm not sure why I was able to just jump in with the food, and there's something about, I don't know, changing up my makeup products and cleaning products that's much harder. We've moved over from plastics to glass almost completely. I'm working on all the other things. I try to say, as soon as we use up one product, we'll try to buy a cleaner replacement for it. And there's a lot of research that there are really strong endocrine disruptors in those products, and they're everywhere. I think some of the worst offenders are in laundry detergents. and fabric softeners. And it's hard, maybe less in the US, but here it's really hard to find clean products that are just easy to buy, convenient to buy, not really expensive. So it's definitely something I'm mindful of. But at the same time, I think if you live in modern society, you're going to come into contact with all of those things. And I try to also remember, like, we do the best we can, because I think it's impossible if you live in modern society to avoid them completely.
Yes, absolutely true.
So, yeah. I'm kind of getting back to diet a little bit. If that's okay. So I'm just kind of curious if you could, like, sort of, so people can get more of a practical view of it. So a typical day for you, like, what would breakfast, lunch, dinner look like? Like, what kinds of foods are you eating? Yeah.
I really focus a lot on having proteins, healthy fats, complex carbohydrates, and lots of fiber. So breakfast for me is usually some kind of eggs with veggies. Maybe I'll have avocado. Lunch is always like a really big salad, but with like a big, full salad. So I'll have a piece of salmon or a big piece of grilled chicken, tons of leafy greens and other veggies packed in, nuts and seeds. It's like in a huge bowl. So it's really something that I want to make sure also that I'm full. Like I don't ever feel like I'm hungry. It's really important to me also to, be in tune with my body and make sure that I'm eating enough. And then dinner is also some kind of like cooked, I don't know, either chicken or meat, stir fry, other roasted veggies. We really try now to have vegetables at every meal,
right?
And some sort of complex carbohydrate, sweet potato, quinoa, wild rice, something like that.
Okay.
And do you, so coming from being such a big snacker, are there, do you have, like you said, you don't keep, treats in the house, but do you indulge? Do you have your time?
Yeah, I definitely have my things that make me, I still really I enjoy eating, and I'm such a foodie. So it's really important to me that I have things that make me feel like, oh, this is a treat. So I'll buy really good quality dark chocolate. And that's always a treat. Really good nut butters that I'll have on apples. I'll always look up, different like gluten-free recipes that have, this or that. I'll make muffins or almond butter cookies. It's important to me that I have it, but I do keep things in the freezer just so that I don't have it all sitting around, because I can still eat 9 cookies and not even blink doing it.
Yeah.
And and it's also that mindlessness of how I used to snack and eat, which I have really stepped away from. I notice that I eat so much more mindfully now. And it's much easier for me to do that for some reason when I'm just sticking more with the savory foods as opposed to the sweet ones.
You brought up gluten, but that wasn't even something we spoke about. But, I'm grain free. And I know that that's made a tremendous impact just on my digestion and my health. But if somebody does have a gluten intolerance or sensitivity, obviously if they have celiac, that's just going to increase inflammation in the body. Right. So it's important to say that. Also, I want to point out that people should definitely have their thyroid checked.
Yes.
We did an episode with Tamar Feldman where we talked all about thyroid, because obviously thyroid does have an impact on hormones as well. If somebody with PCOS has heavy periods and bleeding, they should also make sure that they check for anemia. Right. And, they might need to supplement, but foods like spinach, eggs, broccoli are all good for helping improve anemia, those numbers. Are there any supplements that you took along the way? Anything that helped?
So I started taking just a probiotic because I felt like there was a lot of gut issues, and I wasn't such a big fan of fermented foods. So I really do believe, it's always best to get, whatever nutrients you need from whole food sources. But I knew that I wasn't eating fermented foods and wasn't so willing to try them. So for me, I decided to take a probiotic. But other than that, prenatal vitamins and folic acid. But other than that, I wasn't taking anything.
Yeah. Okay. I will point out that there are studies that show zinc is something that can boost fertility. Obviously, helps the immune system.
Right.
So that's a good one. And then there are things like chaste tree, evening primrose oil that I know are recommended sometimes to help regulate periods, whether or not somebody's trying to get pregnant, just even to regulate periods throughout the month. It helps with PMS, but definitely, as we always say, speak to somebody who's qualified, who's knowledgeable, who can help guide you with, some of these choices. You talked about your meals, and I just also want to say the importance of you eating those meals and the way you eat them and how balanced they are something that will help stabilize your blood sugar.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's going to help with the PCOS as well, too. Okay, so that's lots of good information. So tell me now, you have women who come to you, they approach you because they're suffering from PCOS or infertility issues.
So I work with all types of people. A lot of them are coming to me because when I shared this, I think people were like, oh my God, I didn't know that you could use diet and intervention to work with that. So a lot of people are coming to me because of that, but also I have people who just want, help and guidance with more balanced eating. A lot of people throughout the COVID pandemic have said that they've just lost track of routine, or working from home has made it really difficult, for, just regular eating. And so a lot of people come to me just for help with that. But also a lot of people reach out because they say, I told my doctor, I feel like this isn't normal. They told me just, take this pill or go on birth control, but, it doesn't really work to go on birth control if you're trying to get pregnant. And that's often the most common response, I think, for people with PCOS. They're just put on birth control to regulate their period. So I think a lot of women who are frustrated, they're like, well, I'm looking for something else. What else can I do? And so, yeah, those women will come to me and ask, how can I use diet to help balance my hormones?
Right. So where can people find you, Lauren?
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram at Lauren Allen Nutrition, and my website, laurenallennutrition.com.
Right. And you have a workshop that you do, a group workshop called Balance Your Hormones One-on-One, which is a live virtual course. And you teach women about their bodies. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the most important pieces in this journey for me was just really learning about how my body and how it works and how food interacts with all of that, with the hormones, with, your gut microbiome. And I felt very frustrated at first. Like, why didn't we learn this? Why aren't we taught this in school? Even, the 6th grade health class where they teach you about your changing body. That's the last time that women really formally learn about their bodies. Unless they, take it into their own hands. So I really wanted to create some sort of course where women can take a deeper dive, really learn and understand what blood sugar balance is, how they can use food to balance their blood sugar, what kinds of foods in the standard American diet are causing inflammation, how we could reduce inflammation, and also to really understand how estrogen is really linking the metabolic and reproductive systems. And it's really hard to have a healthy reproductive system when you don't have a healthy metabolic system. Mm-hmm. So in the course, we just go really deep into all of that. And it's amazing. It's really amazing for me to see women come out afterwards and say oh, I feel like I understand how my body works now. And I'm like, yes, it's amazing.
Yeah, that sounds great. And you're right. There is a need. I mean, that's part of the reason we do the podcast, is to help educate people about their bodies, because it's such a complex system.
Right.
And we really don't have a very deep understanding, I think more now than people used to. But we really don't understand how all the systems work and fit together. So That's so important. So happy to hear you're doing that. Just wanted to remind everybody that you can follow me on Instagram at Jill H. Scharfman. And I want to thank our engineer today at the network studios, Mike Cassantini. Don't forget, you can also find us on Schmoozy, the social media app. You can listen to full episodes, and you can also join our forum. So, Lauren, maybe you'll jump on a forum with us in case anybody has any further questions. Any last minute thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
I'm just really glad that you are doing this. I think especially in the Jewish world, it's so important that we talk about things like this, especially PCOS. I know sometimes it's not something that people want to proclaim publicly. So I'm really happy to be part of this conversation where we're, bringing light to it.
Great. Thank you. And remember, everyone, PCOS is not permanent. If they have the right diagnosis and treatment, it can become a thing of the past. So please, if anybody has questions, reach out to Lauren, reach out to your physician to try and get more guidance and help. Thanks so much, Lauren, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
And that is it for this episode of Let My People Eat. Please visit our website at letmypeopleeat.com and leave us a comment. Get in touch with our email at podcast@letmypeopleeat.com or call us at 317-659-0004.
We are also on Facebook. Search for Let My People Eat podcast to join the discussion. You can ask questions and suggest topics you'd like us to talk about in future episodes.
If you like this show, please make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes and tell your friends and family to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Let My People Eat is proud to be part of Jewish Coffee House, where you can find your fill of stimulating podcasts dedicated exclusively to Jewish content.
Please remember that while we are certified professionals, this is not a medical advice podcast. No content, posts, or comments should be interpreted as professional guidance. Always speak to your own doctor about making the right life changes for you.
Until next time, I am Jill Scharfman.
And I am Andrea Moskowitz.
Thanks for joining us, and go in good health.